Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, we will be discussing buffer stocks. Now, you also have a past paper question for buffer stocks as well that came in May June 23, paper 23. Assess the effectiveness of government intervention through buffer stock schemes in agricultural markets. Now, there has been a lot of confusion regarding this topic among the AS students, and hopefully, this video shall put an end to it. So, make sure that you watch the video till the end. Now, as far as this video is concerned, the topic is concerned, you will first discuss in this video what are the buffer stocks, what are they basically, and why are buffer stock schemes implemented by the government, and the potential problems that are associated with agricultural markets specifically. That necessitates government to intervene in these agricultural markets through one of the way, and one of the ways is through the buffer stocks. And then we will diagrammatically see how buffer stocks work through a diagram, and then followed by to what extent are buffer stock schemes successful. So guys, buffer stock schemes is basically an economic strategy of the government which is designed to stabilize the prices of commodities in the market, that is agricultural commodities. So basically, when the government implements these buffer stock schemes, they are implemented to stabilize the prices of agricultural commodities in the agricultural markets. Now there's also confusion among students who at times they don't really know what do you mean by commodities. So commodities are basically raw materials or primary products that are uniform in quality, and they can be bought and sold in large quantities. So that's what commodities are. And so basically, when we're talking about commodities, so there are hard commodities, soft commodities. And now this is just extra knowledge for you so that you understand what commodities are. Hard commodities would include your natural resources such as your metals like gold, silver, copper. It also includes energy resources like natural gas, crude oil, and also includes agricultural products like wheat, corns, soya beans. And these commodities are typically, they are mined, they're extracted, and they're harvested from the earth, right? And it would also include soft commodities like agriculture products like coffee beans, coca, sugar, cotton. All of these are soft commodities. So basically, when you're talking about commodity, we're talking about raw materials or primary products or agricultural products. Basically, that is why we also label it as, or we also say agricultural commodities, right? And these soft commodities like sugar, cotton, coca, these commodities are grown or raised, through agricultural processes, right? So this is basically what commodities are. Now coming back to buffer stocks and the buffer stock scheme intervention in agricultural markets, in agriculture, to stabilize the price of agricultural commodities. So basically, when we talk about buffer stock schemes, so like I said, it is basically the government's plan is to stabilize the prices in agricultural commodities market, because these are volatile markets that are prone to high fluctuations or volatile price fluctuations, right? There's a lot of volatility in prices. Prices may significantly go up and down due to various reasons. Which we will discuss also in this video, and I'll talk about the problems of agricultural markets as well. Now, when you're talking about a buffer stock scheme, so this is achieved by, the government creates a buffer stock, right? You can also call it a reserve stock. So the government creates a buffer stock, which is a reserve, right? And the government or the organization body that basically buys up the commodity or the agriculture products when there is an excess supply. So whenever there would be an excess supply, maybe there's a good harvest. So the problem is that excess supply would drive down the prices, and it would not just drive down in a small fashion, but it could severely drive down the prices to an extent that farmers' revenues could fall, right? So the government would end up buying up that excess supply, which could stabilize those prices, and we'll see how that works. And when the government basically buys up that excess supply, it basically drives up the price back up, and the government could then store it, and then it could sell and release that supply and sell that supply from its reserve whenever there's a shortage in the market for agricultural commodities. Because during these shortages in agricultural markets, maybe there's a bad harvest or something, there's a natural disaster that destroys the crops. So the prices could spike very high, which could be damaging for consumers' welfare. So it could potentially cause food inflation as well. So during those times, the government actually sells agricultural products or agricultural commodities that it has stored in its reserve as buffer stock whenever there's a shortage, which will help in lowering its price and hence again stabilizing it. And the primary goal of the buffer stock scheme, which I also want to write it down, is to mitigate, that is, reduce the volatility in the prices, ensuring the farmers or the producers of these agricultural commodities, they receive a stable income. It's important for them that their incomes are secured, that they have income stability, right? So there is, number one, they receive a stable income, and also it's not only for the agricultural producers or the farmers only, it's also for the consumers as well, because like I said, if there's a bad harvest, the prices could shoot up significantly, which will be bad for the consumer. So in order to ensure the welfare of the consumer as well, that they don't end up paying such high prices for these basic necessities or these basic food items, otherwise it could severely cause food inflation as well, which could cause potential income inequality, especially how will the poor be able to afford, like basic goods like wheat or crops, rice, etc., or sugar. So basically, we also want a very stable sort of a market for consumers as well. So that is why these buffer stock schemes are implemented. So let's say that let's consider a market for wheat, which is a staple food commodity. Now, if the government does not intervene, the problem is that the prices of wheat may fluctuate. And it's not just fluctuations, these are wild fluctuations, volatile fluctuations, which could cause serious concerns for the farmers and producers as well as for the consumers as well, right? And these fluctuations could occur due to factors that are not within the control of neither the producers nor the consumers, such as changes in weather conditions that are beyond our control, right? And this could actually lead to scenarios where, let's say, in times of high production, let's say if the production is very good because of maybe a good harvest, so the prices might plummet, and plummet means it drops at a very high speed, which could negatively impact farmers' revenues, and farmers, to an extent that farmers are unable to cover the cost of production, right? While in times of a bad harvest, let's say when the production is very low, which obviously was not intended by the farmers, but it was beyond their control. So ultimately, the prices had to go up then. So prices might spike. So instead of saying prices rise, you use the word prices spike, which indicates a very sharp rise, right? Prices spike, and at that time, consumers will be like, what the hell is happening? I mean, the prices were, let's say, $10 a kg, but now it's just, it has doubled. So consumers might then be able to afford basic food stuff, right? So here, basically, then comes the buffer stock scheme. So the government or the designated agency of the government might decide to, purchase that wheat or agricultural commodity, whatever it is, whatever sort of an agricultural commodity or product it is. When, the harvest is abundant, the government will purchase it. And at times when the harvest is very much abundant, the production is very high in terms of quantity, the market prices are dropping. And the government will basically set a predefined level. You know what? Let's say $20 a kilo is a good price that should be that we are defining in the market, and we won't let the prices neither go above it or below it. Let's say if the buffer stock schemes work perfectly. So and if during times of a very good harvest, if the market prices are dropping below this predefined level, what the government will do is that the government will buy it, and this will prevent the price to drop. How and why? Yeah, we'll show this on the diagram. I'll show you guys on the diagram, and it will store that wheat as buffer stock. And let's say in the next season, if the harvest is poor, the next season yields a poor harvest, and the market prices are rising above that predefined level. So the government's agencies will release the wheat from the buffer stock that it had stored in the previous season into the market, which will again bring down the price, again stabilizing the price basically, right? And you see, buffer stocks schemes, they are important. They really matter, because the buffer stock schemes hold a very significant importance for both consumers and producers in agricultural markets. Because for producers, especially because particularly in the agricultural sector, it basically provides a safety net, right? It provides a safety net to the producers that protects them against income volatility arising from fluctuations and arising from fluctuating prices of agricultural commodities. And what this does is that this can then encourage sustained investment in production. I mean, more producers would be willing to invest in the agricultural sector. See, for a country like Pakistan, buffer stock schemes could work because our country is dependent on exports of agriculture. So for us, it is very much important that we protect our agricultural sector. We protect our producers of the agricultural sector for our farmers. So, and we would want, producers to invest in this sector. So that, but again, we have to then, guarantee a minimum sort of a price to them through these schemes then. So if the producers know that their incomes are protected and it provides a safety net to the producers, then this will encourage sustained investment in production in agricultural markets, because now they know that there is a guaranteed minimum price that they will get, right? And also for the consumers as well, it is important. These buffer stock schemes are important because especially in the case of essential commodities like food grains, such as schemes will ensure affordability, not only affordability of the product, but also availability of the product as well, as the government could possibly release the buffer stock during times of shortages, right? Because the government will dampen and reduce the extreme fluctuations in the prices. So these buffer stock schemes will actually play a big contribution to food security. Food security it will provide the food security, and not only that, in fact it will also prevent situations or scenarios of panic buying or even hoarding as well. It will prevent the scenarios or situations where panic buying is done or hoarding is done. So it will prevent those sort of scenarios. Now guys, before I move on to buffer stock schemes and show you the diagram how buffer stocks work, I want you guys to understand that why do agricultural commodities, agricultural markets, they have an underlying problem. That is, why do incomes of farmers fluctuate, and why are farmers so bothered about these price fluctuations, and why is there a need to for the governments to intervene. So we'll diagrammatically show that. So agricultural commodities, like I said, they go through volatile price fluctuations, and as compared to manufactured goods, definitely the manufactured goods will not go through so serious high levels of price fluctuations as agricultural commodities would, because of three major reasons. Firstly, the supply is relatively inelastic, and it's not only the supply being relatively inelastic, it's the demand that is being relatively inelastic as well. And it's actually the demand that is actually relatively inelastic that becomes one of the major reasons why small changes in supply could cause large price fluctuations. Also, supply is highly unpredictable because of unpredictable weather conditions. So the thing is, for example, in this diagram, for example, you can see that, for example, if there's a bumper crop and the supply goes up, and you can see that despite the supply being despite you having a huge supply this year, the quantity that is being sold in the market is very less significantly, and primarily this boils down to your demand being inelastic, right? So, and as a result of this, what's happening is that the supply is going up, the quantity in the market is only increased by very less, that is only 10% increase in the quantity being sold. However, the price reduction is quite huge, and this will actually bother the farmers, because you see, the old revenue would be price times quantity at 1,000, and the new revenue is only 660, right? So this will definitely bother the farmers now, right? Their incomes are not secure in this way. I mean, you see how the incomes of the farmers are greatly reduced. While on the other hand, if there's a shortage, if the supply goes down, maybe because there's a poor harvest, maybe because of flooding or something like that, right? You can see that a fall in supply is causing a large, significant increase in price, while the quantity traded goes down from 110 to 100, right? And the quantity that is reduced in the market is 10%, while the price fluctuation is quite high, right? If you can calculate the percentage changes, by the way. But anyways, the point is that you see, the revenues for farmers are actually going up. But even then, it's not that for all the farmers this will be beneficial, and I'll come to that point. But this price of $10, let's say, is harmful for the consumers, because obviously the poor consumers cannot afford this, right? So this is quite an alarming situation, because in year one the prices are going up, while in year one the prices are going down, while in year two the prices are going up. So this is very unstable situation for the consumers as well, for the farmers as well, because farmers would be, producers and capital owners would be reluctant to invest in these agricultural markets because of unstable incomes, right? And consumers will be worse off in this case, and that is why there's a need for the government to intervene. And even if you argue that, a bad harvest is good for farmers because their revenues are going up, while this could be true to an extent, but although overall farm incomes will be higher than your average farm incomes as compared in the second diagram, yes, but only those farmers who have the crops to sell, only they will benefit, right? Because farmers whose crops have been mostly or completely destroyed will receive little or no income at all, even if the prices are rising, right? So not all farmers will benefit, okay, and the consumers will be worse off. So therefore there's a need for the government to actually jump in and intervene and do something about, to stabilize these markets, right? And because otherwise this will create massive income inequalities. The poor people cannot afford this price, while this price is very much less for the farmers. It will significantly affect poor farmers' incomes, right? Now guys, let's see on a demand supply diagram how would actually a buffer stock work. So what you can see on your screen is that you have two supply curves and a demand curve, right? One is showing the supply when your harvest is poor, and the other is showing the supply when you have a glut, right? So the diagram shows that if you have a good harvest, like let's say a bumper crop, that is a glut situation, right? A glut basically means excessively abundant supply of something, right? So the price will be P glut and the quantity will be Q glut. And if we have a poor harvest, right, and so the price would be P poor and the quantity would be Q poor and the supply would be S poor, right? And you have two equilibrium points A and B. So this is representing the P poor, and P glut is representing the situation that if you have a very poor harvest, then the price would be P poor. That would be the market price. And if there's a bumper crop, then the price would be P glut, right? And we can see from the diagram that between the equilibrium points A and B, there is a lot of variation in our prices. Look at this price. This is too high while this is too low. There's a lot of variation, right? And both prices, P poor and P glut, both prices are indicating a huge gap. The poor harvest is, if your harvest is poor, it's shooting up the price too high, while a good harvest is shooting it too low. It's, the prices are going down to a very low level, right? Creating unstable incomes for farmers and unpredictable situations in both the circumstances, right? Now, the government will basically enforce a buffer stock scheme here to stabilize the prices. And what it will do is that the first thing that they will do, the first step that they will take is that they will first establish and set up what the optimal price or what the best price or the stable price, let's call it the intervention price, would be. They will first set up the intervention price or the stable price, right? So the government agencies will first establish that, and let's say that the intervention price, is this. It's somewhere here. Is this, right? This is your intervention price. So the government then promises to act. Once it sets up the intervention price, it promises to act whenever the price deviates from the intervention price, right? So it won't really let the price go down from the intervention price, neither it would allow the price to go up from the intervention price. And it will use the buffer stock scheme policy to do that. And we'll see how this would work, right? And whenever the price will deviate, the government promises to maintain this price in this market, regardless of whatever the supply conditions are, right? And now let's do some analysis to see how will the government keep this price stable if there is a poor harvest or if there's a good harvest. So now let's assume that we have a glut, that is, we have abundant good harvest and we hit a bumper crop. So in the time of glut, the market price you can see is P glut, right? And this price is too low. And this would be the price P glut would be the price without any sort of government intervention. And this price is too low, and this is damaging for the farmers' incomes, right? And if there's a bumper crop, then this would be the price that would prevail in the market. But since we have a buffer stock scheme in place where the government has promised a price of, the intervention price, and let's say let's call the intervention price, let's call it, P star. Just a second. So let's call this price P star, right? So this price P star, which is your intervention price, which is your stable price that the government has said, promising the farmers to, ensure this price and make that in every possible way the government will make sure that this is the price that prevails in the market and the prices don't neither goes up or down from this level. So let's say that we have a buffer stock scheme in place where the government has promised a price of P star. So now let's see, at this price, if the government is saying that this is the price that it will ensure that prevails in the market, so the government will basically make this the market price. Now, in order to make this the market price, then demand has to be equal to supply at this price, because the government will say this is the market. The government will make this price as the market price, right? So if this is the market price, and at this price, the demand has to be equal to supply. So at this price, let's see what the demand and what the supply is, right? So if I extend this line, so if we see what the demand is at this price, so the demand at this price is this much. Let's call this X, and let's say the supply, we're going to be extending it till the S glut supply curve, right? And the supply, let's say Y, right? So at a price of P star, which is your stable price, our quantity demanded is, let's say, X, while our quantity supplied is, let's say, Y. So we have a surplus here. We have a surplus at a price of P star, right? And the government wants to make this your market price, and it has to do something about it, right? Now, so what the government will do is that the government agencies will enter this agricultural market, and I want you guys to write this in the exam as well, that the government will enter the agricultural market as a buyer, and it will buy up all the surplus. It will buy up all the surplus XY, right? Because under this buffer stock scheme, all this surplus, under this scheme, the government had guaranteed the farmers to buy up this surplus. All this surplus is guaranteed to be bought up by the government, right? And when the government buys up this surplus, what happens is that when the government buys up this surplus and enters the market as a buyer of this surplus, it increases the demand for the agricultural commodity, for this particular agricultural commodity, and hence the demand shifts to D1, right? And when the demand shifts to D1, the demand curve shifts outwards to D1, right? And now see the magic happening. If the demand curve shifts outward to D1, what happens is that this price, this becomes your equilibrium, and this price becomes your equilibrium price, and the price stabilizes back at P star. So what happens is that demand shifts to D1, stabilizing the price back at P star, which is our guaranteed price to the farmers, and hence restoring the market equilibrium at P star, right? So this is how buffer stock schemes work. And I'll repeat what just happened here, that because the government has to, so if there's a glut situation, there's a bumper crop, so this will be your market price. But the government doesn't want this to be the market price. The government has set this price, and it has guaranteed that, we're going to be making sure that the prices remain stable at this price, right? So at this price, the demand is this much, while the supply is this much. There's a surplus, right? So we know that we have a surplus right now, right? The government has to buy up this surplus in order to ensure that, prices remain stable at P star, which is your intervention price. So when the government basically buys up this surplus, it increases the demand for this product, for this agricultural commodity, shifting a demand curve outwards, and hence, making this your new equilibrium, and this becomes your equilibrium price, and hence this P star then becomes your equilibrium price, and hence prices are restored back at P star, right? Now guys, let's take a scenario where we have a poor harvest. Now I'm going to be showing it on the same diagram, and I've erased the previous lines, but ideally in the exam situation, I would want you guys to make two separate diagrams, one which will show a good harvest situation and how the prices are restored back at P star, and one with a poor harvest situation, which we are doing right now. So if you have a poor harvest, so what will happen is that markets will end up at markets will end up at point B basically, where the prices are spiking up, and the price is very high, and I'm calling this P poor, which means price after you have a very poor harvest, right? And this price is and as already mentioned before as well, this price is not good for the interest of the consumers. And so in this instance, what the government, would want to do is that it will it will want to make sure the prices is force back down from P poor to P star. It will force back the price down, but it will make sure that this is not the market price. The consumers don't have to end up paying this price, right? And so at P star, if we were to see that at P star, which is our intervention price, if we were to see that at P star our quantity supplied, what our quantity supply and quantity demanded is. So let's say at P star, and now S poor will be the focus of our attention. So at P star the quantity supplied is this much. Let's say it's C, while the quantity demanded at P star is, let's say, D, right? So the quantity supplied is C while the quantity demanded is D, which means that the quantity demanded is D, where the price line P star intersects the demand curve, right? So what we see is that the demand is greater than the supply, okay? And hence we have a shortage. Now, right, and I want you to focus, if this buffer stock scheme is set up properly from day one and managed and administered properly and executed properly and effectively, then there will be a surplus already and ready in storage in place as reserves. So the government simply has to release some of those reserves, stocks or surplus stocks, back into the marketplace, selling it back into the marketplace. And we know from economic theory tells us that as we increase the supply, that will reduce the price, right? And we can illustrate this now on the diagram, that if you want the price to go back to P star, that if we want this price to be a market price at P star, and we don't want this P poor to be our price despite having a poor harvest, so what needs to be done is that we need to increase the supply somehow. And what the government will do is that the government will take out those surplus stocks from its reserves and release it into the market. And diagrammatically, this will have the effect of shifting the supply curve outwards to S1, shifting the supply curve outwards to S1 like this, okay? The supply curve shifts to S1, and make an arrow that is shifting towards the right. One arrow is enough. And as a consequence, what we see is, as a consequence of that shift of supply, the price is restored back at P star. So this price, this is now our equilibrium basically. We can erase this. This is now our equilibrium basically, right? This is our equilibrium, and this price is now our equilibrium price. So basically the government has actually restored this price back, okay? So this price automatically becomes our equilibrium price, and the government has restored this price back, and hence the price is stable or forced back at P star, or the intervention price. It's stable back at P star, right? So this is basically how buffer stocks works. And whenever you are faced with a question for buffer stocks, you will have to make these two diagrams to show the mechanism how actually buffer stocks are working. So whenever you have a good harvest, the government will basically buy the surplus back to increase the demand, and that will force the price back at P star. And whenever there is a poor harvest, the government will release some of those stocks, or as much stocks are needed to be released to bring the price back down to P star. In other words, what this would just end up doing for the farmers is that it would ensure price stability, and ensuring that prices remain stable at P star, which is your intervention price, and eliminating the uncertainty or the unstable, volatile price fluctuations. And that's how buffer stock schemes work, right? And P star, by the way, is also called as a target price as well by some textbooks as well. So you can write this as well, that P star is your target price, and the government will make sure to stabilize the price at your target price. That is P star. Okay. So now I'll be ending this video here, but we are left with another video. In the next video, what I will do is that I will cover the pros and cons of buffer stock schemes and the advantages, the evaluation for buffer stock schemes, because the past paper question was asking you assess the effectiveness of government intervention through buffer stock schemes. So we need to discuss its pros, cons. Some of the pros you're already, we have already covered the start of the video, but we need to discuss the downside, and we also need to discuss the evaluation for it, since the question is asking assess the effectiveness of government intervention, which means that you definitely have to evaluate this question, right? And you can find the digital notes or whatever I've written for this video in the description down below. So that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you all on the next video. Make sure to share this video with your friends so that they also understand this topic properly. Until then, take care.